Hey guys, Argent here. I promised this for a while, and I try to deliver on my promises. People keep asking me about this stuff, so I rather than just respond to each individual comment and each individual instance someone asked me about this, I decided I would just make a big video series going through the entirety of it. People are always saying, why do you believe in Christianity? Why do you believe in God? Why are you a practicing Catholic? Why did you decide to convert? And this is just going to go through all of that. This is extensively just going to go through all this stuff. I'm going to lay it all out there. And hopefully if this doesn't convince people, people will at least understand where I'm coming from. And maybe have some more respect for it. So that being said, let's begin. So why am I even bothering? Like I said, people ask me, why do you believe in God? A lot on this channel, a lot of people with similar political views to me tend to be around my age, and they grew up without the benefit of, in Catholicism we call it catechesis, really any kind of half-decent religious education. And they tend to have grown up with happy-clappy, overly emotional, lame arguments. If they've ever had any arguments, it's literally like, Jesus loves you, go to church. They aren't aware that there is a long history of rational, thoughtful arguments for the existence of God and for Christianity. They just don't have that experience. They may have read something like The God Delusion, where Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or one of these other new atheists basically does a straw man attack on Christianity, or they go and debate some not particularly skilled evangelical guy who's not really a philosopher and can't really respond to them, or they use rhetorical tricks or a bunch of stuff. I don't have a lot of respect for the new atheists intellectually. I think they kind of they use a lot of, like I said, a lot of intellectual sleight of hand, a lot of straw men. They often will refuse to debate people. If they actually debate someone competent, what they'll often do is just resort to ad hominem attacks. I forget a number of the people William Lane Craig has debated. After he basically answers all their objections, they just start making fun of him, and they ignore everything he said, and they just go, well, there's no evidence for anything you just said, and they don't respond to his argument, and that's kind of how I find new atheism. And the reason new atheism can thrive, and this is kind of the point to that little discussion, is because people have no conception that since the New Testament, people have been engaging in Christian philosophy. I believe it's Paul who says the Jews respect signs and the Greeks respect wisdom. He describes Athens as being a people who love wisdom, and he in Acts uses intellectual, philosophical arguments to convince them of Christianity. I forget if it's Paul or Peter who says, when questioned about the hope in your heart, you have to be prepared with a reasoned defense. You have to be prepared to defend your faith against people who challenge it. You got to be prepared to explain it, what you believe, and more importantly, why. And that's something every Christian is called to do. And I have kind of a unique approach, kind of a different approach, an approach I haven't really seen, called the cumulative argument. And we will go into that. We will go into all of this. This serves as an introduction. This will be a 3-part series on arguments for God, arguments for Christianity, arguments for Catholicism. And by parts, I mean each part will be about 6 to 10 videos, depending on how much research I do, depending on the amount of time I have, and depending on how long it takes. Because when you're actually doing it, it's a bit different, because there might be more research than you thought. You might discover something else while you're reading through stuff and have to make another video, etc. So I think a lot of the approaches are flawed. There's a lot of really good stuff out there, but a lot of them are lacking certain things that I would do. So rather than just complain, I'm going to see if I can do it better. Also, as they say on Game of Thrones, Valar Dohaeris, all men must serve, and this is how I serve. I consider myself pretty good at philosophy. Back in university, I got all A's and A pluses. I did a minor in philosophy, actually. Actually, the two highest grades I ever got were an A plus in the Hindu tradition and an A plus in Indian philosophy. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying I have some experience doing philosophy. I'm not a complete layman. I only studied it at an undergraduate level, but I do have some understanding of it, and I have read a fair amount of philosophy over the years. So, next slide. Why do apologetics matter? What is the purpose of this, so to speak? Apologetics comes from the Greek word apologia, or defense. An apology is a defense. In Western colloquial terms, apology tends to mean something a bit different. It means offering excuses. It means apologizing. To apologize for something is to admit it's bad and to kind of beg for mercy, I guess, in an intellectual sense. It's to go, okay, yeah, this thing I believe in sucks. It's terrible, but please just let up. That's not what it means. It means to defend something. You could say, like, I don't know, the Crusades were an apologia for Western civilization. To defend a city against someone who's trying to burn it down is to defend it. That doesn't mean you make excuses for it. It means you try to protect it. You try to say why it's a good thing and why it deserves to survive. So that's what apologetics are. So apologetics are important, and they're often neglected because they appeal to a higher grade of people, a person. They appeal to smarter people, people with more education, particular university education. They appeal to a lot of scientists, wealthier people, more powerful people. It's very often what happens, and what traditionally happened was missionaries would go to a new kingdom, say Russia, for instance, or Bohemia or Hungary, and they'd get like their smartest bishops to go there and talk to the king, and the king would convert, or they'd convert someone in his household, say his wife or one of his children, or a trusted advisor, and then they would use their influence to spread the gospel, to spread belief. And in some situations, like with Vladimir the Great of Kiev, he converted, and the entire Russian people converted to Eastern Orthodoxy. So, oftentimes, apologetics tends to target the people who make the biggest net difference. It's pretty easy to just go into people who are not terribly well educated or particularly have particularly high IQs, and I'm not insulting them, I'm just stating a fact. Like, it's pretty easy to go to some random village in Africa and convert the people there. It's a lot harder to convert university-educated Westerners. But this can have a lot of impact. C.S. Lewis was an atheist. He was a very ardent atheist. But he met J.R. Tolkien, interestingly enough, the author of Lord of the Rings, in university, and J.R. Tolkien converted him. J.R. Tolkien whittled him down gradually with lots and lots of arguments and apologetics, and C.S. Lewis, very reluctantly and kicking and screaming, was brought to the faith, and he is now one of the greatest known, probably the best known modern Christian apologists. So, he is worth, I'm not saying in terms of, because God obviously values all our souls, but he is worth converting tens of thousands of just kind of laymen. The massive influence he has had on the culture and on religious thought. Also, there's just as many spiritualities as there are people. Rationalism appeals more to some people than others. Emotion appeals to some people. Some people are more cerebral. Some people respond more to physical sensation. It's a core part of Catholicism, and it's the reason why we have such a diversity of practices. That's not to say there's not theology, there's not orthodoxy, there's not certain things you have to do and certain duties, but to a large extent, spirituality is very individually dependent. Some people respond better to some things than to other things. So this is to appeal to a certain type of people. So a bit about my background. So I was raised in the United Mennonite Church. I hated it. I renounced Christianity when I was around 12. I was briefly an atheist because I met the first person, or I guess I'll go into a bit of detail. So the United Church and the Mennonite Church are basically two of the most liberal branches of Christianity. They're very much anti-rationalist, anti-structure, anti-defined doctrine. They're very much... The United Church I don't even really think believes in God anymore. They allow atheists to be ministers in it. The Mennonite Church believes in sola scriptura, so you just read the Bible for yourself, and then everything should work out. So they reject intellectualism, they reject reason, they reject the concept of defined doctrine. If anything, they almost have a disdain for it. They consider it a papist or Catholic thing to try and defend your faith. A lot of it's just emotionalism, love Jesus because he loves you type of thing. A lot of it's just they come from communities that are the same religion as them and they've just never heard another idea. So they reject the idea that you can really convert people or that it matters. There's an element of fideism, which is the fideism is the act of rejection that you can prove God to people or you convert people. People just believe or they don't believe. Or the idea that you should believe but you shouldn't try to prove it and it's a bad thing to have any evidence. So I met someone who was actually... So I renounced that when I was 12 because I thought it was bullshit. I was briefly an atheist in grade 12 because I met someone who was a communist and a atheist, and he kind of used very basic level atheistic elements, mainly from the God delusion. Basically from the God delusion and just other kind of new atheist popular level books. So I was briefly a atheist, but that caused me to have a psychological breakdown in which I had to start going for therapy and start taking antidepressants. I'm not going to argue that that wasn't to a large degree based on my pre-existing condition, which is bipolar, which was evident even back then. So I couldn't handle being an atheist, so I became a deist. And we'll go into what deism is later. It's basically kind of a stripped-down theism. So I've always been interested in truth. I've always been interested in metaphysics and cosmology. So I explored pretty much every other religion other than Christianity. I never looked into Christian philosophy because I regarded it as being, like my upbringing, just completely useless, completely just emotional, sappy stuff. My main objection to Christianity is kind of the opposite of everyone else's. I wanted a more rigorous religion. I wanted a religion that asked more of the individual. I didn't like all this happy-clappy, everyone loves you stuff. Because I look at the world and I see a lot of beauty, but I see a lot of horror and evil. And I want a God who will come down from heaven with fire and brimstone and rain justice and vengeance upon all the evil people in the world. All the child molesters, all the murderers, all the rapists. Just all the people and all the things that are evil in the world. And I wanted it to be cast down and destroyed. So actually the Old Testament appealed to me a lot more than the New. I kind of liked the God of the Old Testament a lot, and I thought Jesus was bad and weak, and no one had ever explained any of it to me. I didn't even realize that Jesus was God until I was like 21, because no one had ever explained it to me, because they reject doctrine. So I LARPed as a Zoroastrian, and to be fair, I still... LARP is live-action role-playing, so I pretended to be a Zoroastrian without ever talking to another Zoroastrian. So I prayed to Ahura Mazda. I still regard Zoroaster as a forerunner to Christianity and a truly enlightened prophet, and I regard Ahura Mazda as being a real conception of God. Not the ideal one because they didn't have the Trinity, but I regard it as being a legitimate religion, much like Judaism is, and a forerunner to Christianity. So eventually, I went through a lot of difficulties in my life, a lot of political changes, a lot of personal troubles, and through a combination of rational arguments, evidence, and personal experience, I was converted to Christianity and then eventually Catholicism, being inducted into the church in Easter 2013. Which was a very... or maybe it was 2014. Sorry, I get confused. Yeah, it was 2014, actually. I'm kind of confused. Just because I started going to my convert classes in 2013, around the middle of the year, so just a month or two after Easter. And then I was converted about 8 months later. So it was a very long process, so I get a bit confused on that. So I was Catholic for a full year as of Easter this year. So my approach to theology is largely rationalist. Always like Plato, like Descartes, like rationalist theology, kind of common sense, logical, somewhat analytical. My confirmation name was going to be Thomas Maria, but my church dispensed with this tradition because they dispense with all traditions, because the particular church I go to every Sunday is quite liberal. So, Thomas Maria obviously comes from St. Thomas Aquinas and the Virgin Mary, Our Lady, the Queen of Heaven, because I have a Marian devotion. I wear a miraculous medal, and Thomas Aquinas is my favorite saint because of his logical and rational approach to theology. That being said, my theology is Thomistic and Platonistic, which we'll get into more later. I borrow a great deal from Eastern Orthodoxy, which is not theologically different from Catholicism. It's just worded very differently, and it's culturally very different, but it's not, at its core, it's not very different from Catholicism. It's not, they don't believe in anything we don't. So overall, I call myself a pretty Orthodox Catholic. More conservative than traditionalist, although it depends on the issue. I'm very traditionalist on political and social issues. On some issues like salvation, I tend to be more conservative, more kind of like what Catholic Answers teaches. I tend to be more liberal on that, more kind of believing that most people will be saved and that everyone who can be saved will be saved, as opposed to the more traditionalist view, which is virtually no one will be saved, and like 90% of people to 99% of people are definitely going to hell. So my view about creationism and evolution, I accept the universe is 14 billion years old. Evolution obviously exists. I think it was John Paul II who said it's more than a theory. I don't really know of many Catholics who don't believe in evolution. I think the first time I met like a traditionalist who didn't, it kind of surprised me. Generally speaking, virtually all Catholics, including a lot of very right-wing ones, believe in evolution and etc., and that just comes from the way our church views science in general. So I call my position theistic evolution. I don't really understand what intelligent design is. That's not because I haven't looked into it, I just didn't really understand why it was different from theistic evolution, or why people were so negative about intelligent design when they seem to be okay with theistic evolution. I don't really get how it's different. It seems like a difference without a distinction to me. So I just say theistic evolution because intelligent design turns people off for some reason. Okay, so my main sources for this course are a number of different places. Primarily Christian philosophers. I go into Plato and Aristotle a lot. Thomas Aquinas was largely his work was about reconciling Greek philosophy and Christianity successfully, in my view. Also, a lot of it's from Christian philosopher William Lane Craig, who is one of the most intelligent men I've ever seen. He is a Baptist, but he's very rationalistic. He's very systematic, and kind of his role is he's a very good compiler. He kind of takes the arguments other philosophers have come up with, and he makes them better, simpler, and deals with a lot of the flaws and shortcomings of them, and he kind of compiles them together. So, I highly recommend checking out his website, Reasonable Faith. He's an extremely active and productive guy. He produces 2 podcasts, one called Reasonable Faith, where he answers questions. You can send him a question and he'll do a podcast about it. He's a professor of theology and analytical philosophy. I forget what university it's at. But he wrote a number of books called, the most notable being Reasonable Faith. He has a apostolate called Reasonable Faith. And he has a class called Defenders, where he basically does what I'm going to do. And he goes through all the classical arguments for the existence of God. He also has a very active YouTube presence. He is kind of the nexus of modern Christian apologetics. He doesn't always come up with that much new stuff, but he takes what other people have and makes it simpler, makes it more palatable and easier to understand. So check him out. I'll post a couple links if I remember. So what is the approach of this course? I will attempt to argue God's existence using reason, intuition, evidence, and to some degree emotion. Some arguments appeal more to some people than others, so I will present most of the arguments, even if I don't find them personally convincing. Like, the ontological argument is not convincing to me, but I will present it because it appeals to some people, and because it is it's an argument. It's an argument that's commonly used, and that's kind of my job here, is to just go through all the arguments. If they don't appeal to me, they might appeal to some other people. A lot of the more emotional ones don't really appeal to me, but I'll present them anyways and try to give them a fair hearing. I will be giving my own commentary and saying whether or not I find something convincing. I'm excluding miracles and personal experience. That will come in when I talk about Christianity. I do think it's legitimate, but I think it's very subjective, and it just turns a lot of people off, and it's very hard to argue. It's kind of something, either you have a personal experience or you don't, and you can't really expect other people to accept it. Miracles are a bit more complicated, but I kind of feel if someone won't even accept the bare basics of God, or the bare possibility that there's a metaphysical reality beyond the immediately observable world, they aren't going to accept miracles, and they'll just come up with explanations. Even if it's something like Fatima, where like 70,000 people directly experienced a miracle, they won't accept it, and they come up with stuff like mini black holes or something. So I will not be referencing the Bible as an authoritative source. I may quote from it. I may reference aspects of teaching as they relate to the arguments. I will not be saying the Bible says this, so it's true. That's dumb. There's no reason for people to accept the Bible if you don't establish independent arguments for God's existence, and you don't establish the historical reliability of the Bible and Christianity, which I will do in part 2. So, I believe, as Vatican I teaches, Vatican I being a council from the mid-19th century that the Catholic Church had, that knowledge of God can come from nature and reason alone. So I won't be Bible thumping. Catholics don't really Bible thump anyways. We have a much more complicated interface with the Bible compared to Protestants. Okay. So the structure will be part 1, arguments for God, attempting to establish a bare-bones version of God as the all-powerful creator of the universe, recognizable to an Enlightenment deist. Makes sense, pretty straightforward. I'll go into more detail about these when I get to them. Part 2, argument for Christianity. Having established the existence of God, I will attempt to establish Christianity as the true version of God and as the true faith. By establishing its historicity, the reliability of the Bible, the core role of Christianity in Western civilization, and ultimately just the impact it's had. So I'll be going through a lot of history, a lot of early church, a lot of why I think Christianity is true and why other religions I don't think can be true. So all that good stuff in part 2. This is the one I'm the weakest on, by the way. Just because there's a lot of very kind of technical historical details to go through. I will do my best. I'm a lot better at part 1 and part 3, though. And then if we get to it, there's the argument for Catholicism. So having argued that Christianity is true, and having hopefully established that, I will attempt to establish Catholicism as the correct denomination of Christianity. Through a variety of arguments, I will acknowledge, for instance, that the Orthodox are not heretical, but merely in schism, and they are the other lung of the Church. So arguments for Catholicism are also arguments for Orthodoxy, broadly speaking. So my goals, if you are Catholic or some other Christian denomination, I hope this strengthens your faith and also helps you to defend it when challenged. I hope this is spiritually beneficial, and I hope the next time someone says, oh, there's no evidence, this gives you something to say back to them. Obviously, I hope this makes you go out and get baptized, or go out and join Mother Church, enroll in RCIA. But I understand that's probably not going to happen. At the very least, though, in Catholicism we believe there's varying levels of truth. Different religions have different levels of truth to them. Not all religions contain some truth, but it's varying levels. Obviously, an evangelical Protestant, in our view, would be much, much closer to the truth than some random person, some random shaman somewhere, or some random tribe in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So hopefully I can bring you closer to the truth. Failing all that, though, I hope you reconsider your view of Christianity and faith, and that you acknowledge the validity of some of my arguments and understand they have merits, and that you just gain more respect for it, and you acknowledge there are good arguments and there are good reasons to believe in these things. So that's basically my goal. I think I've talked long enough. That's the introduction. Once again, this will be a long process, so I don't feel that bad about making this a long video. And next time we will go into the cumulative argument for God's existence. This is Argent Templar signing out.